Hey, Abigail. Are you really okay? On the morning of the field trip, I asked my granddaughter Abigail. But Abigail replied, "I'm fine. Plus, I'm looking forward to Grandma's delicious sandwiches, so I'm going." And left the house earlier than usual. I watched Abigail head to school with a prayerful heart. I hope it ends up being a fun day. I couldn't help but wish. But my wish didn't come true. Just 30 minutes later, the worst happened. "Abigail! What happened?" When I opened the door, there stood my granddaughter, who had supposedly left for the field trip earlier, crying with her backpack covered in mud. Then, "Look inside," she said, offering the backpack filled with a ton of trash. I felt a surge of rage at the tragic sight. "What is this?" as I trembled with anger trying to remove the trash from the backpack. "Is something wrong?" My son Richard, who was working remotely, appeared behind me. "Richard, this," I said, trying to suppress my anger and disappointment, presenting Abigail's backpack to him. Richard then picked up the trash from the backpack and, "Is this?" murmured with a smile towards Abigail. The next moment, "That's great," he said. "Yeah, everyone put it in." I was so happy I cried. "Now, I'll be late for the field trip if I don't go," Abigail said laughing and went back to school. Left out of the loop, I stood dumbfounded watching Abigail energetically run off. My name is Isabella, a 55-year-old housewife. My husband Kevin and I have been living with our son Richard and granddaughter Abigail for the past 5 months. The reason for our living together was that Richard's wife, Madison, passed away due to illness. Madison had terminal cervical cancer. She always had severe menstrual pains and would often rely on over-the-counter painkillers when feeling unwell. Additionally, she had irregular periods and occasional abnormal bleeding from a young age, which made her insensitive to bodily changes. As a result, by the time she realized something was wrong, it was already too late. When the hospital called to say she needed to be admitted for treatment immediately, I was in shock. Richard told me over the phone that Madison had cervical cancer, his voice filled with despair and powerlessness. The shock of the cancer diagnosis was one thing, but in Madison's case, the cancer had already begun to spread to other areas, making surgery impossible. Therefore, they had to try chemotherapy and radiation therapy. However, the treatments did not have the hoped-for effects. Richard's voice became increasingly dark and weak with each phone call. All I could do was listen to my son's stories. And respond. Then, a year ago, Madison quietly passed away in her hospital bed. It happened just 8 months after the cancer was discovered. If only I had pushed harder for her to go to the gynecologist. After Madison's death, Richard blamed himself for his indifference to her health and fell into a deep depression. In addition to caring for Abigail, who was in the 1st grade, and managing unfamiliar household tasks, he was overwhelmed both physically and emotionally. Abigail, too, seemed confused by the sudden loss of her mom, occasionally crying at night and refusing to go to school. My husband and I wanted to encourage and support them, so we suggested living together. Initially, Richard was hesitant, but he said, "Having someone always at home might make Abigail feel safer," becoming more open to the idea. However, Richard had one major concern about living together. It was that Abigail would have to transfer schools as we moved in together. Richard worried that transferring schools, especially while grieving Madison's death, would be too much of a psychological burden for Abigail. But facing the reality of juggling work, household duties, and childcare, he felt he was reaching his limit. After much deliberation, Richard couldn't come to a decision. So, he decided to ask Abigail herself how she felt about it. Hey, Abigail. Grandma and Grandpa said they'd like us to live with them at their house. What do you think? Live at Grandma and Grandpa's house? I want to go. Is that so? It means you'll have to change schools. Is that okay? What does change schools mean? It means just like moving houses, you'll move to a new school. So, you won't see your current school friends anymore. Is that okay? I see. Does Dad want to move? Dad is fine with whatever. What you want is most important. Then I want to move. That means Grandma will always be with me, right? Yes, both Grandma and Grandpa will be with you always. So, let's start preparing for the move, okay? Abigail nodded strongly in agreement to Richard's final confirmation. Thus, my son's family came to live with us. Later on, I learned that Abigail decided to move for Richard's sake. Dad looks so busy with work every day, and he seems really busy with things like my homework and meals. So, I thought it would be easier for Dad if Grandma and Grandpa were with us. When Madison was in critical condition, I had stayed at Richard's house and took over all the household duties. It seems Abigail thought that living with us would reduce Richard's burden based on that experience. Both my husband and I were deeply touched by Abigail's kindness. And so, in place of busy Richard, we gave all our love and time to Abigail. Perhaps because of our efforts, Abigail, who was initially quiet and reserved after moving, gradually began to regain her former brightness. Still, sometimes she would look sadly at classmates chatting happily with their moms during shopping trips or school events. Even if she's putting on a brave face, it must still be hard for her. At that moment, I resolved to do anything I could for Abigail's smile. One day, while shopping at a nearby supermarket, a woman around Richard's age approached me. Hello. You're Abigail's grandmother, right? I'm the mom of Scarlett, who's in the same class. My daughter always talks about how kind you are. This woman, who introduced herself as Elizabeth, approached me with a strong perfume scent and a forced smile. I recognized her face, so I knew immediately she was a parent from the same class. However, I didn't have a very good impression of Elizabeth. The reason is, when I attended a school event in place of Richard, Elizabeth and other moms would look at me and Abigail and laugh, sharing rumors. I thought it might be a misunderstanding at first, but the same happened even when Richard attended. I thought she was quite rude. But since we were just classmates' parents and didn't interact much, I decided not to worry about it. Being unexpectedly approached by someone I was not comfortable with. What should I do? I'm not very fond of this person, I thought to myself. But thinking of her as my granddaughter's mom, I decided to continue the conversation for a while. Elizabeth then stood in the middle of the supermarket aisle and suddenly started bragging about her family. I can't give you details because it's personal, but my husband is a rising star in a big corporation. So, he earns more than most people. And he's trusted so much by his boss that he's about to get promoted. Is that so? Congratulations. Plus, my daughter is academically excellent and popular in her class. She was even scouted to be a kids model. That's impressive. I should be going soon. Thinking it wasn't a conversation worth blocking the supermarket aisle for, I attempted to leave. Then Elizabeth, just listen till the end, I'm not finished, raised her voice suddenly. Taken aback by her abrupt change, I involuntarily stopped. This is why I hate dealing with old people. Anyway, what I'm saying is, your granddaughter is a bad influence, so I'd appreciate it if she didn't associate with my daughter anymore. Eh? What do you mean? Abigail's mom died from an illness, right? It's really sad for Abigail, left behind. She still looks sad sometimes. It's like she's spreading unhappiness? Like a walking misfortune? What are you trying to say? Basically, Abigail's presence is bothersome. What are you talking about? It's a critical time for us. My husband is up for a promotion. So, I've told my daughter not to hang out with Abigail to avoid catching her bad luck, but Abigail keeps following her around, and it's causing us trouble. Please tell her off firmly. Elizabeth said that and disappeared into the crowd at the supermarket with a snide smile. I was left standing there, stunned by the cruel content of the conversation and the unexpected event, unable to retort. That evening, when my husband Kevin came home, I told him about what happened at the supermarket. So, that happened. Maybe Abigail is having a hard time at school? What should we do? Call the teacher? Oh, should we consult with Richard first?
Isabella, calm down. Did any other parents say something like this?
Eh? No, this was the first time.
Then let's just talk to Richard and observe a bit more. We don't want to make a fuss and make Abigail feel worse, right?
But to be told such things? She must be suffering at school. At least, let's ask about how things are at school. Okay?
All right, calm down. I'll bring it up during dinner tonight and see how things go from there. Is that okay?
Yes, please. My husband reluctantly agreed, understanding my feelings. I really wanted to ask Abigail directly. But upon reflection, I might press her too much out of concern if I were to ask. Thinking this, my husband seemed more suited to calmly handle the conversation this time. That night, dinner was just the three of us, as Richard came home late from work. Abigail helped with dinner as usual and enjoyed my cooking, saying it was delicious. From her behavior, it was hard to believe she was having a hard time at school.
Maybe she's hiding it so we won't notice.
For the first time today, I doubted Abigail's actions. And as the meal was coming to an end, I signaled my husband. He cleared his throat and casually asked Abigail, "How's the new school? Are you having fun?" Abigail stopped eating and was silent for a while at the sudden question. Then, in a small voice,
"It was fun before, but not so much now,"
she answered. I thought to myself, I knew it. Then, "What's not fun?" I asked Abigail. Abigail hesitantly began to talk about what was happening at school.
Scarlett suddenly said she didn't want to play anymore. She said we couldn't be together during break or when going home from school.
According to Abigail, Scarlett had suddenly started ignoring and avoiding her about a month ago. And because of that, other classmates also began to act distant towards Abigail. Why doesn't Scarlett want to play with you anymore? Did you ask her why? My husband also asked Abigail, sounding concerned. But it seems Abigail herself couldn't think of any reason.
Maybe everyone hates me now?
Abigail muttered, then cried with big tears rolling down her cheeks.
I may have underestimated how serious the situation was.
I quietly stood up, hugged Abigail, and gently rubbed her back. Then, Richard came home. Surprised by the sight of Abigail crying, my husband explained the conversation during dinner. Richard, somehow very calm, knelt down to match Abigail's gaze and said, "It's okay, Abigail. No matter what, the three of us will protect you." He gently stroked Abigail's head. Then, standing up, he said, "Dad, can I talk to you for a sec?" And called my husband to another room to start a discussion. Probably about what to do next. Abigail, perhaps touched by Richard's words, began to cry loudly, releasing her pent-up feelings. I held her, letting her cry until she felt better. and strongly wished that these sad tears would only be for today. A few days later, Abigail brought home a letter about an upcoming field trip.
The timing is terrible, knowing she's not getting along with her friends and now a field trip.
The moment I read the letter, I imagined Abigail being alone on the field trip. And remembered the big tears from a few days ago, feeling my heart was about to burst.
Hey, Abigail. Just in case, if you don't want to go on the field trip, you don't have to force yourself.
I shared my thoughts with Abigail before consulting Richard or my husband. I knew it was important to discuss as a family, but I couldn't help worrying about Abigail. Then, after a moment of silence, Abigail said, "I'm okay. I want to go on the field trip because I want to eat Grandma's sandwiches," and answered with her usual bright smile. That night, Abigail excitedly told her dad and my husband about the field trip. Both smiled and said, "Sounds fun." But I couldn't shake off my worries. So, on the morning of the day, "Hey, Abigail. Are you really okay?" I asked again. However, Abigail said, "I'm okay. Plus, I'm looking forward to Grandma's delicious sandwiches, so I'm going," and left the house earlier than usual. I watched Abigail head to school with a prayerful heart.
Please, let it end as a fun day.
But my wish did not come true. Just 30 minutes later, the worst happened. The doorbell rang and I rushed to the front door in a panic. "Abigail! What happened?" There stood my granddaughter, who had supposedly left for the field trip earlier, crying with her backpack covered in mud. Then, "Look inside," she said, offering the backpack filled with a ton of trash. The leisure sheet we folded neatly together the night before, the field trip guidebook we colored cutely, and the sandwiches I made that morning were all buried under the trash and not visible. I felt a surge of intense anger at the tragic sight. "What is this?" as I trembled with anger trying to remove the trash from the backpack. "Is something wrong?" My son Richard, who was working remotely, appeared behind me. Despite everything, Richard was worried about Abigail too. Unusually for him, he had said, "I'll work remotely today," and stayed in the living room from the morning to keep an eye on Abigail. And after Abigail left, he seemed restless and couldn't concentrate on his work. Richard must have been hoping that Abigail would enjoy the field trip and return home happily. But instead, this happened. "Richard, this," I said, trying to suppress my anger and despair while presenting Abigail's backpack to him. Then Richard picked up the trash from the backpack and,
"Is this?"
murmured with a smile towards Abigail. The next moment, "That's great," he said. I was confused by Richard's incomprehensible behavior, almost raising my voice in confusion. However, Abigail, just like Richard, laughed and said, "Yeah, everyone put it in." I was so happy I cried. "Now, I'll be late for the field trip if I don't go," and went back to school. Left out of the loop, I stood dumbfounded watching Abigail energetically run off. Richard then told me, "We've taken care of it, it's going to be okay now," and smiled gently before going upstairs. My head was still full of unanswered questions. But I didn't want to disturb Richard while he was working, so I silently started to clean up the dishes in the living room. I don't really understand, but I'm just glad Abigail could smile. At that moment, I was happier to see Abigail's smile than to resolve my own questions. Since Richard said, "It's going to be okay," I thought I could talk to him later at leisure. I felt a sense of relief for the first time in days and felt lighter. After finishing the chores, I unusually dozed off on the living room sofa. When I woke up, it was an hour before Abigail's return. "Oh no! I slept so much," I have to do the laundry, prepare the bath, and make dinner. I hurried to finish the chores and was preparing dinner when, as expected, Abigail returned home. As usual, the doorbell rang. And I responded with, "Coming." But the scene displayed on the screen made me tense up again. There was a man with a regretful face, a girl who looked like she might start crying any moment, and Elizabeth with a very unhappy face. In a panic, I called for Richard upstairs. Surprised but calm, Richard first opened the door and warmly welcomed Abigail. "Welcome back." With a smile. Abigail returned the smile just like in the morning. "I'm home," she answered and jumped into Richard's arms. Watching Richard and the others. "Nice to meet you, I'm Scarlett's dad." May I have a moment of your time?" The unfamiliar man spoke in a weak voice. Richard quietly responded, "Please, come in," and welcomed the three of them to the entrance. Indeed, this man was Scarlett's dad, and the girl was Abigail's classmate, Scarlett. Upon entering, Scarlett's dad immediately started to apologize deeply. "I'm truly sorry for my wife's disgraceful actions that deeply hurt your daughter." Next to him, "I'm sorry, Abigail." Scarlett also tearfully apologized. Scarlett's dad then continued to explain the situation. It turns out Scarlett was popular among her friends, and Elizabeth took pride in that. However, when Abigail transferred to the school, she quickly became the center of attention in the class. Scarlett didn't mind this and would often talk about Abigail to Elizabeth. Elizabeth then said, "Just because she's a transfer student, she's getting too much attention. Using the fact that she doesn't have a mom to garner sympathy from everyone. What a mean girl. Scarlett is the star of the class. I'll make sure she realizes that." And she told Scarlett, "Listen, Scarlett. Abigail is actually a very mean girl. You shouldn't hang out with her. Make sure to tell this to your classmates too and suggest that everyone stops playing with Abigail. Got it? You can do it, right?" I really wanted to keep playing with Abigail. But if I broke the promise, Mom would punish me. Scarlett clung to her dad's arm and earnestly shared her feelings. It later turned out that the punishment Scarlett mentioned involved Elizabeth hitting her on the head, back, or buttocks. Scarlett was just scared of the punishment and had been following Elizabeth's orders. Elizabeth, who had been controlling Scarlett through violence, didn't expect what happened next. Not a single one of Scarlett's classmates accepted her suggestion. Instead, wanting to cheer up Abigail, who was mourning her mom, they secretly collected empty snack boxes with points for Abigail's favorite character merchandise. Unaware of this, Abigail had been concerned about her classmates whispering and hiding things from her. A few days ago during dinner, "Maybe everyone hates me. That's why," she tearfully told us. But in reality, Abigail wasn't disliked by anyone. On the contrary, the kids had come up with the idea to surprise her with gifts on the field trip day. Abigail went to school earlier than usual that day because her classmates had called her out for the surprise. When she arrived in the classroom, her classmates filled her backpack with those empty boxes. "Wow, thank you, everyone. Oh, I need to tell Dad and Grandma about this. I'll be right back." Abigail excitedly left the classroom, clutching her backpack. But she tripped and fell at the shoe lockers, getting her backpack covered in mud. That's when Scarlett happened to pass by. "Abigail, are you okay?" "Yeah, I'm fine. I'm just going to go home for a bit." "A forgotten item?" "No, look, isn't it amazing?" Scarlett remembered the classmate's surprise gift upon seeing inside Abigail's backpack. "I'm going to show it to Grandma and Dad." Seeing Abigail's beaming smile, Scarlett wanted to do something for her too. So she said, "Oh, wait. You're hurt, so let me put this on you," and offered to put her cherished character Band-Aid on Abigail's knee. "Really? Isn't this your treasure?" "It's okay. Because Abigail is an important friend." "Thank you. I'll rush over and show you, or else we'll be late for the field trip." On her way home, Abigail seemed moved by everyone's kindness, tears overflowing. I saw Abigail, muddy backpack and all, crying, and thought she had a terrible time at school. But to think such a wonderful thing was happening. Both Richard and I were moved by this wonderful event and found ourselves in tears. "Scarlett really loves you. So, if you don't mind, please play with Scarlett again. We'd really appreciate it." Scarlett's dad said this and then apologized deeply once more. "Your feelings have come across clearly, so please, no need for apologies. Abigail, you can make up with Scarlett, right?" "Yeah. Scarlett is an important friend." Afterward, "I'm so sorry," they said, apologizing repeatedly as the three of them went home. Throughout this conversation, Elizabeth didn't say a word. She glared at us the entire time with a look of dissatisfaction. To hurt a child and not even apologize. I thought Elizabeth was rude and selfish for just standing there without apologizing. But I was about to learn that wasn't the case. What? Scarlett's dad is Kevin's subordinate? After Abigail went to bed, I reported the evening's events to my husband, along with Richard. It was then, from Richard and my husband, that I heard the true story. According to Richard, the realization that Scarlett's dad was my husband's subordinate came from a casual conversation at a school event. But thinking it would be awkward to bring it up, he decided to let it go. Dad's job and me are entirely separate. But when it comes to Abigail, it's a different story. A few nights before, after seeing Abigail in tears, Richard told my husband about Scarlett's dad. The next day, my husband called Scarlett's dad to discuss what had happened. Scarlett's dad promptly checked the facts with Elizabeth and Scarlett. And upon finding out my husband's story was true, he rushed to finish his work and came to our house to apologize. So that's why Elizabeth was glaring. But it turns out she's decent after all. He's very serious and trustworthy, both in his work and character. Maybe even too serious. We'll have to support him, as it might get tough from here on. Just as my husband had secretly predicted, Elizabeth and her husband ended up divorcing soon after. However, since Elizabeth was a housewife, "If you want a divorce, you'll need to ensure my lifestyle. And I'll never give up Scarlett's custody. I need $5,000 a month for living and child support. If you can't pay, no divorce." She demanded unreasonable conditions. Scarlett's dad consulted a lawyer and began gathering evidence to make the divorce favorable for him. It then came to light that Elizabeth had been cheating with a man she met on a dating app. Elizabeth was obsessed with her affair partner, but suddenly, she could no longer contact him. After being blocked from messaging and calls, Elizabeth was always irritated. And that irritation gradually turned into excessive expectations for Scarlett. "You have to be the best at lessons and school. If you fail, there will be consequences." Scarlett worked hard and diligently met Elizabeth's expectations. Yet, Elizabeth continued to punish her for unreasonable reasons regularly. This was officially recognized, and Scarlett's custody was granted to her dad. He even demanded compensation for the affair, and Elizabeth, now working part-time, is struggling to pay it. After this event, a pleasant change occurred in our home. Abigail, who previously only had my husband and me to play with after school, now had a playmate. And that was Scarlett. To be honest, I didn't have a very good image of Scarlett. But after the divorce was finalized and she was freed from Mom's control, Scarlett turned out to be a very kind and considerate child. Above all, Abigail's joyful smile when playing with Scarlett said everything. Since then, Abigail and Scarlett have been playing together almost every day. I am now very happy to see Abigail's smile every day, something I've always wished for. And I plan to continue pouring unwavering love into Abigail, hoping this happiness lasts forever. My husband Curtis looked at me and snapped. A hospital stay just for an ulcer? It's not that serious of a disease. You're making too much of a big deal out of it. It seemed like he wasn't worried at all. It's because you pushed her too hard, Ashley said, making him uncomfortable, so he declared, I'll go buy something to drink, and left the room. After a while, Curtis came back looking very anxious. You have only a year left to live, he said solemnly. What? I was surprised, wondering if there had been some explanation from the doctor that I was unaware of. No, I just overheard your parents talking outside. I was going to greet them, but then I heard something like that. I wondered what my parents were talking about. As we sat in silence, Ashley suddenly burst into laughter. Pfft. Ha ha ha. Wondering what was going on, we both looked at Ashley. Then she turned to Curtis and dropped a bombshell. What are you talking about? Isn't that about your mistress and not Mom? The air froze. Dad, we know everything. Hey Stella, isn't breakfast ready yet? As usual, Curtis called out to me. I was in the kitchen, preparing breakfast. It'll be ready soon, I answered while setting up the corn soup and bread on the table. I told you I have a meeting this morning. I have preparations to make. Hurry up. I placed the omelet on a plate in front of Curtis, who started eating without a prayer. After all, I was just preparing everything as usual. It was he who overslept. Suppressing my thoughts, I started doing the laundry. Once Curtis hurried out, I finally took a breath of relief. The morning news show started, and I took my breakfast to the lively sound of the TV. As a housewife, I spent my days like this, taking care of Curtis. After 25 years of marriage, with a lot of time spent alone at home, I've been thinking about picking up a hobby, but my shy nature always gets in the way, preventing me from taking the first step. Every day, I prepare breakfast for Curtis, do the laundry, clean, shop. I was getting bored with the repetition of the same days. I've thought about going to work, but I've been frail since I was young, and after giving birth to our daughter Ashley, I became even more prone to illness, so that was not an option. Will my life just end without anything changing? As I was thinking this, the doorbell rang. The sound of the front door unlocking was heard, and Ashley entered. Mom, are you here? She said, opening the door to the living room. Welcome back. Ashley sometimes comes back like this to check on me. When I'm not feeling well, she even helps with the housework. She's such a capable daughter. How are you feeling? I've been doing quite well recently. Ashley looked relieved to see my face, smiling gently. That's good to hear. Then, how about we go out for lunch? You must be bored, right? She suggested. We went to a restaurant near where Ashley works and talked about her recent life over the meal. These moments were a happy time for me, and also a break from the monotony of my daily life. After finishing our grocery shopping for dinner and returning home, Ashley set down the bags she was carrying and quickly went back to her own place. When I asked if she didn't want to see Curtis, Dad's probably fine, she simply replied. Indeed, Curtis, at 48, still looked young for his age. He would work out at the gym after work, and lately, he even started caring about his looks, keeping his body fit and his skin lively. He always had high self-esteem, saying, "I don't want to become someone who gives up just because they're getting older." Compared to Curtis, I feel like an old woman, overshadowed by him and treated coldly. After Ashley left, a flyer on the table caught my eye. It was something that had been put in the mailbox. The flyer featured a beautiful woman. It seemed to be for a yoga class being held nearby. Taught by an active model, offering reasonable prices for people of all ages. I wonder if I could manage yoga, given my frail health. But I found myself making excuses and tucked the flyer away between the pages of a newspaper. Looking at the clock, it was almost 5 p.m. I must start preparing dinner soon. If Curtis comes home and dinner isn't ready, he'll yell at me again. Since he was in a bad mood from the morning, I planned to make his favorite dishes. And so, I found myself preparing dinner for Curtis again, as usual. Around 7 p.m., Curtis came home. I immediately started preparing the shower. Curtis prefers to shower before dinner. While waiting for the shower to be ready, Curtis was drinking a can of beer and reading the newspaper in the living room.
Wow! Isn't she a beauty?
I was startled by his sudden outburst, only to realize he was looking at the yoga class flyer I had tucked in. Huh. A model and yoga instructor, huh. It's close to our house too. Hey, why don't you give it a try? He said, looking at me with a sarcastic tone. An old woman like me going there would just be a nuisance. I brushed it off lightly, but he sighed. You always say that. Try to take care of your body a little. It seemed he was also tired of my negative thinking. You used to be good in your younger days, but you're becoming more of an old woman day by day. He left those words behind and headed to the bathroom. When did I start to feel so miserable? It had become so routine that I seemed to have become numb to it. But even so, I can't go back to my younger days. I knew all too well that the reason I never took action was none other than myself. Envious of the radiant smile of the woman on the yoga class flyer, I felt like I was living in a world far removed from blaming someone or something else. On his next day off, Curtis left with the yoga class flyer. Are men allowed to go there too? It was a class held at a young woman's home. Wondering if that was really okay, I asked. It says here people of all ages and genders. So it should be fine. I'm just going to observe. If it's not okay, I'll come right back. He left the house cheerfully, leaving me behind. I wish he had taken me with him. Even though I had chosen not to go, I found myself blaming others again. Fed up with myself, I decided to go for a walk for a change of scenery. I wondered if I could catch a glimpse of what the yoga class was like, even if from outside. It was a sunny Saturday afternoon. Perfect for a walk. I walked at my own pace. Eventually, I reached the neighboring town where the yoga class was. I didn't remember the address from the flyer, but I had a rough map in my head. And so, I walked looking for the yoga studio sign. Yoga. Yoga. Then I realized. There were no signs for a yoga studio around here. I can't tell where it is. Just as I was about to give up and go back, I heard a familiar laugh. Turning the corner towards the sound, I saw a man and a woman I recognized, sitting at a garden table, enjoying tea. It was unmistakable. Curtis and the yoga class instructor. Not wanting Curtis to notice me, I couldn't hear what they were talking about, but they seemed to be having a great time. Despite being my husband, I was impressed that he didn't seem out of place even next to a young woman. Suddenly, I felt miserably shabby and pathetic. Unable to stay still, I quickly returned the way I came. Why do I always end up like this? All the way home, I kept blaming myself. It wasn't just about my deteriorated appearance. Above all, I needed to do something about this self-deprecating personality. I resolved to change. In the evening, as I was preparing dinner, Curtis came home in a particularly good mood. "How was the yoga class?" My heart raced, wondering if he knew I had seen him having a good time. "Yeah, it was fun. The teacher was around Ashley's age, but she had proper qualifications as an instructor and seemed very competent." So she was that young. I wondered what kind of conversations they had, what made them enjoy their time so much. I became a bit curious. Maybe I should try yoga too, I murmured to myself then. No, that would be impossible for you." Curtis looked me up and down exaggeratedly before laughing. "There were a few others there, but none like an old woman like you. You'd just embarrass yourself." Hearing that, I got angry. I was jealous of the yoga instructor, but I had been trying to think more positively. Seeing my expression, "If you're so angry, you should have done something about it sooner," he said dismissively before disappearing into the bathroom. I thought about attending on a weekday when Curtis wouldn't know, but I was sure they'd identify us as a couple based on our last name or address. If Curtis found out, he'd surely berate me. So, despite my resolve earlier in the day, I became gloomy and secluded myself. 3 months had passed since Curtis started attending the yoga class. He went there on his days off, not just for yoga, but it seemed he was also helping with minor DIY for home decor and other small errands. "Isn't that something you shouldn't have to help with?" I brought it up to Curtis, concerned, but he snapped at me. "A girl around Ashley's age is in trouble, and you won't let me help her? Or do you think there's something shady going on?" Ridiculous. Even though he's not the kind to help around the house even when I'm feeling unwell. It was unbearable to feel like he valued the instructor more than me. But I couldn't neglect my household duties. I focused more on housework, and Curtis complained about me even more. Ashley, who occasionally came to help, said to Curtis, "Dad, you're being too harsh on Mom." But he dismissed her. "That's Stella's job. If you've moved out, don't interfere." Ashley, perhaps fed up with Curtis, started coming back when he wasn't around. Then one day, I finally fell ill and collapsed. Luckily, Ashley was coming home that day and took me to the hospital. Ashley was shocked to find me curled up in the kitchen, thinking her heart would stop. She even contacted my parents, who live nearby, and I was surprised to see them visit me in the hospital bed after the examination. I couldn't help it. "You're already frail," Ashley said, looking down. Who could blame her for worrying? "Thank you for worrying about me." After explaining the examination results to Ashley and my parents, they left the room, relieved. I was diagnosed with a gastric ulcer. After seeing my parents off, Ashley came back to the room to vent. "I contacted Dad too. He's late, isn't he?" I knew Curtis wouldn't leave work early to rush over for me. But it still felt lonely. "I'll come again tomorrow." "You'll need a change of clothes, right?" Ashley couldn't bear to leave me looking so forlorn. I was grateful to have raised such a kind daughter. That was my only pride. "I'll contact Dad again." "See you tomorrow." Ashley left, but Curtis didn't come to the hospital room that day. The next day, Ashley brought me the things I needed for my hospital stay. Looking somewhat guilty, Curtis was standing behind her. As soon as he saw me, he sneered. "A hospital stay just for an ulcer? It's not that serious of a disease. You're making too much of a big deal out of it." He seemed not to be worried at all. "You've been pushing her too hard," Ashley said, making him uncomfortable, so he announced,
I'll go buy something to drink.
And left the room.
Really, I can't believe him, of all people.
Ashley seemed thoroughly disgusted. I thought he might just leave, but surprisingly, he came back quickly and very anxious.
You have only a year left to live,
Curtis said, looking serious. It seemed it was no joke.
What?
I was shocked, wondering if there had been some explanation from the doctor that I was unaware of.
I just overheard your parents talking outside. I was going to greet them, but then I heard something like that.
I wondered what my parents were talking about. As we sat in silence, Ashley suddenly started laughing.
Pfft. Ha ha ha.
Wondering what was going on, the two of us looked at Ashley. Then Ashley turned to Curtis and said something shocking.
What are you talking about? Isn't that about your mistress and not Mom?
The atmosphere froze. Stella, are you okay? I came to check on you. Cutting through the tension, my parents arrived.
Grandma, Grandpa. I was just about to talk about everything. So, we're doing it now.
Dad was silent, but his glare kept Curtis from running away. Dad, we know everything. Ashley began to tell everything. It was about a month after Curtis started going to the yoga class. On her way home from our house, Ashley witnessed something unbelievable. That day, I had been telling Ashley about the yoga class. I reconsidered wanting to go myself and asked Ashley to check it out for me. I asked her to go and ask if it was really a kind of place that would make me feel out of place, like Curtis said. I could have gone myself, but I was scared. Sure, I can even check it out on my way home today. Ashley agreed cheerfully and went to the yoga class. When Ashley got close to the studio, she saw someone leaving the entrance. She quickly hid around the corner to see it was apparently Curtis and the instructor. Curtis was supposed to be at work that day, but Ashley couldn't have mistaken her own father. Feeling something was off, Ashley stayed hidden and watched. After a while of conversation, Curtis and the woman, after checking their surroundings, leaned in and kissed. Ashley was shocked and couldn't suppress her feelings of contempt after seeing her father like that. That's why she started coming home only when Curtis wasn't there. After watching Curtis leave, Ashley immediately contacted me.
Mom, you'd better stay away from there.
Ashley, usually so positive, saying something like that made me ask what was wrong, but she wouldn't say.
I just feel like you and that instructor wouldn't get along.
Looking back, it must have been Ashley's kindness trying not to alarm me. Unaware, I regretted missing another chance to go to the yoga class, but a few days later, while walking near the studio again, I spotted a suspicious woman hiding by a fence, seemingly trying to peek inside.
How disturbing.
Approaching, I realized it was Ashley. What was she doing? She hadn't noticed me approaching. Not wanting to startle her, I stopped and called her mobile, hoping it was someone else, but knowing it was Ashley. My wish shattered when she noticed the call from me and walked away from the studio to answer.
Hello, Ashley? What are you doing there?
I asked, sighing. Surprised, Ashley looked around and saw me. And when she saw me in the distance, I'm coming over. She ended the call and hurried to me.
I thought there was some suspicious person.
Seeing my disapproving face, she looked awkward.
So, what were you doing?
Staring back at me, she said.
We'll stand out here. Let's talk somewhere else.
Deciding something, she began walking.
We can go to our house since Curtis won't be back yet.
Feeling the seriousness, we headed home. Upon arriving home, I made some tea. After taking a moment to relax, I once again asked Ashley. So, what were you doing there?
That's the yoga studio Curtis attends, right?
I had previously asked her to scout the place for me, to see what the atmosphere was like, but I thought that matter had been resolved then.
Look, before I say anything else, I want you to know that I'm always on your side, no matter what.
Starting with that, Ashley told me everything she had seen. On the day she went to observe the yoga studio, she saw Curtis and the instructor coming out looking cozy. They talked intimately and kissed after checking their surroundings. She had been hesitant to tell me, carrying the burden alone to avoid hurting me.
I wanted to believe in Dad, too,
Ashley said, sipping her tea. She had wanted to believe, so she kept going back to the yoga studio. But contrary to her hopes, Curtis was frequently there, getting along well with the instructor.
I was thinking, if I could somehow catch them in the act.
If she had proof, she could confront Curtis. She thought by having something over him, she could make him stop treating me badly.
I could have been reported for stalking.
Discovering her there helped Ashley regain her composure.
Yes.
Despite hearing about Curtis's affair, I somehow remained calm. I had suspected something beyond just yoga lessons. Curtis denied it, but I lacked the courage to delve further.
Hey, Mom. Are we just going to leave things as they are?
Ashley looked at me worriedly.
If you're up for it, I'm willing to help.
I immediately understood what she was hinting at.
You're asking if I'm considering divorce?
Ashley just nodded without saying a word. What do I want? I asked myself. Honestly, even if I decided to divorce, I wasn't sure I could make it on my own. Having been a housewife all this time, could I really find work? Plus, there were my health concerns. Ashley offered her support, but I couldn't always depend on her. Sensing my deep thought, Ashley reassured me. Even if you decide not to divorce, like I said earlier, I'm always on your side. And left before Curtis came home. Curtis arrived and immediately started complaining about everything as usual. The taste of dinner, the cleanliness of the house, as if he was searching for faults on purpose. Had it not been for the discussion with Ashley earlier, I might have been able to ignore it, but today I couldn't. Hearing the facts from Ashley, everything Curtis did started to disgust me. His voice, being in the same room, everything felt repulsive. That night, after Curtis had gone to sleep, I decided to check his mobile phone in a desperate search for evidence. If there was proof, I would divorce him. I knew it was wrong, but the betrayal started with Curtis. Convincing myself, I checked his phone. But my last hope was shattered. Texts and photos with the instructor, undeniable evidence of his affair, were there. Quietly closing the phone, I went to the living room and lay down on the sofa. I couldn't bear to sleep in the same room.
I'll contact Ashley first thing tomorrow.
And that's how our plan began. Ashley and I decided to inform my parents first. If the divorce went through, I'd move back to my parents' house. So, it was necessary to explain the situation. Hearing this, my parents were furious. After discussing it as a group, we decided to act at the moment that would make the yoga instructor the happiest. During her surveillance, Ashley found out the instructor apparently had another man. I'll attend the yoga class and gather information. Saying that, Ashley started attending the yoga class and got closer to Curtis's mistress, Hilda. It turned out, just as Ashley had guessed, Hilda was engaged and planning to get married in a year. We'll target that time to demand alimony in the divorce trial. Ashley was oddly enthusiastic, but I felt heavy-hearted. I was anxious about whether I could let Curtis be free for so long and act as if everything was normal. Even now, just living in the same house made me feel sick. My anxiety and the stress of living with Curtis culminated in me developing a gastric ulcer. After telling me all that had happened,
honestly, I didn't realize you were under so much stress.
I'm sorry, Ashley said. When I was taken to the hospital, she discussed with my parents and decided to change the plan to immediate divorce and claim alimony. Hearing Ashley's story, Curtis just hung his head in silence. The 1 year left you heard about was referring to your mistress Hilda's modeling career. Ashley spoke coldly and formally to Curtis. There's no need for such drastic measures. A normal divorce would suffice. Don't destroy someone's happiness like that. Hearing Curtis prioritize Hilda's happiness over our divorce, I felt an anger like never before. Before Ashley could retort, I confronted Curtis. The one who has been destroying my happiness talks now. Curtis looked at me as if bitten by his own dog. After all the exploitation, not caring about my health but worrying about another woman, it's disgusting. I had never known I could despise someone so much. It was the first time I realized that I had such feelings inside me. Disgusting, you say? You don't have the right to talk back to me. My negative emotions were overflowing. Ashley tried to intervene, but she seemed bewildered by my anger. Just as I was about to lash out at Curtis again, Mom intervened softly. That's enough, Stella. Her voice was gentle and comforting. A voice I'd known since childhood. I snapped back to reality. After a moment of silence, Mom calmly addressed Curtis. Curtis. I've heard the situation from both Ashley and Stella, but I haven't heard it from you. Curtis looked uncomfortable. If you have any justification, we're listening. Her voice, different from when she scolded me earlier, now carried a chill. I don't have any excuses. Curtis stammered. So, you admit everything is true? Seemingly accepting his fate, Curtis defiantly admitted. Yes. I love Hilda, not Stella. I can't help it. Stella no longer attracts me. That's terrible. Ashley muttered. Terrible, you say? Which is worse? I thought Hilda and I loved each other. But to think, Hilda had another man. It seemed Curtis didn't know about Hilda's fiancé. He trembled, fighting back tears. Do you understand what you're saying? Mom confronted Curtis. After making Stella feel the same way, how dare you feel sorry for yourself only? Curtis looked down, unable to raise his face. Ashley and Mom spoke for me, but I felt nothing for Curtis anymore. I just wanted to be away from him. That was my only wish. With the divorce, we'll also be claiming alimony from you and Hilda, so please leave for today. I told Curtis formally. He stood up weakly, avoided our gazes, and left the hospital room. I cried over the wasted time I had spent with such a man. After being discharged, Ashley and I went to Hilda's yoga studio. It was under the guise of Ashley canceling her membership, but we intended to tell Hilda everything. However, just as we were about to start, Curtis barged in. As we stood dumbfounded, Curtis snatched Hilda's mobile phone from her resisting hands and called her fiancé. In a fit of desperation, Curtis exposed everything to the fiancé and laughed maniacally. After fiddling with Hilda's phone, he threw it at her and left, making deliberate noise with his steps. As Hilda sat on the floor, I told her. That was my husband. Why has it come to this? Hilda looked up at me with surprise, but retorted. That man approached me. If you're his wife, you should at least teach your husband some manners. I'm getting divorced, and we have all the evidence of the affair. Ashley countered with equal fervor. Whatever you think, we will be claiming alimony in the divorce trial. Realizing talking here wouldn't make Hilda admit anything, I decided to leave her house with Ashley. Later, Hilda tried to make excuses to her fiancé, but since Curtis had exposed irrefutable photos and messages, her engagement was called off. Furthermore, since Hilda's fiancé was the owner of the entertainment agency she belonged to, she ended up being blacklisted from modeling work. Of course, her yoga studio, financed by her fiancé, was closed down soon after. This story was briefly mentioned in gossip magazines, so whether it was entirely true or not is uncertain. However, a for-lease sign was definitely posted on the yoga studio's house. Faced with undeniable evidence, Curtis and Hilda couldn't resist and had to comply with the compensation claim. After the divorce, I stayed at my parents' house for a while, but moved due to harassment from Curtis and Hilda. Both Curtis and Hilda probably thought they could handle the situation at first, but eventually fell apart. Chased by the alimony payments, Curtis lost his money for gym and beauty treatments, his appearance deteriorated, yet he still made advances on young women at work and ended up being sued. He was fired from his job and even in his new job was relegated to a menial position, spending his days alone organizing documents and supplies. He blamed me for his downfall, claiming it was all because I discovered the affair and filed for divorce. As seen in the tabloids, Hilda, after being abandoned by her fiancé, was sued for the yoga studio's business expenses and chased by debt. She blamed me for her misfortune. My parents quickly sold their house and bought a condominium where the four of us could live together. The condominium has excellent security, so we no longer need to fear harassment from Curtis and Hilda. Feeling it pathetic to rely solely on Ashley's income and my parents' pensions, I learned to use a computer from Ashley and started working from home. I'm surprised to find I had such a talent. Today, I'm writing a column about life's battles. My life might have been an uneventful housewife's, but this divorce saga is sure to attract attention. While adding a bit of color to the story, I type the words. My face is wrapped in a gentle smile. Right. I forgot, she exclaimed, rummaging through her small bag to pull out a white envelope. What's this? It's a letter I got from Grandma. She told me to read it in secret, away from Caleb. I took the letter from Scarlett. Just then, my sister arrived to pick Scarlett up, and I handed her over. After saying goodbye to Scarlett, I quietly opened the letter. Glancing over it casually, I was shocked. What? You're kidding, right? The content was hard to believe. Rushed, I went back to where Caleb was. As soon as I returned, Caleb spoke in a whiny tone. Hey Evelyn, I'm thirsty. Could you get me some juice or something? Ignoring his request, I swiftly flipped back the comforter and reached for Caleb's pants. What? Evelyn? Without hesitation, I pulled down his pants. What the heck are you doing all of a sudden? Caleb yelled, hastily trying to pull his pants back up. I sighed at the unfolding scene. Looks like Mom's prediction was right. Hey! What's the deal with suddenly pulling down someone's pants? Are you taking advantage of my inability to move? That's awful, isn't it? Caleb looked up at me, perplexed. Indeed, it was wrong to do it without saying anything. But without that, I wouldn't have been able to confirm it. My name is Evelyn, 32 years old. I graduated and joined the company, and it's been 10 years. With this tenure, I have a stable income and am trusted with various responsibilities at work. I've been leading a fulfilling life, but there was one worry. It's about my husband, Caleb, whom I've been married to for 5 years. Our encounter was at a friend's wedding. We just happened to sit at the same table. Ah, weddings are wonderful, aren't they? Really, they both look so happy. We didn't talk much, but I was impressed by how genuinely happy Caleb seemed for the bride and groom. Later, through a friend, Caleb made the first move, and we started dating smoothly. I want to marry you. After Caleb's straightforward proposal, we got married. The surprise came later. What? You've been divorced before? And you have a child? Yeah, and you see, my ex-wife is demanding child support. Despite his divorce, his ability to genuinely celebrate others' weddings was, in a way, impressive.
About the child support, isn't it just better to pay it? That's part of being a father, right? No, the thing is, I'm out of money this month.
What? I had a sneaking suspicion that Caleb's income wasn't great. But I never imagined I'd end up paying child support for a child I didn't know with my salary.
I rushed into marriage.
I didn't regret marrying him, to be honest. But the real issue was Caleb's carelessness with money and his failure to see the problem.
I quit my job again,
he'd say with a nonchalant smile, time and time again.
You quit. What are we going to do now?
It'll be fine. You're working too, Evelyn. We'll manage somehow. He was the definition of relying on others. I didn't want him to depend on my money.
Did he marry me for my money?
I sometimes wondered. But putting money aside, Caleb wasn't a bad husband. He was a bit unconventional, but that was what made life exciting and fun. Feeling like something sweet. Want to hit the convenience store? Now?
Yeah.
On a weekday night, on a whim, we'd end up at the convenience store, just for sweets.
All right. I'm not sleeping until I beat this game tonight.
Okay. Sometimes I'd end up pulling an all-nighter with him over a game. It was honestly tough at our age, but I didn't dislike his spirit. That's why I couldn't leave Caleb, despite his financial irresponsibility and job instability. He wasn't cheating, at least. I thought as I let things slide, and before I knew it, here we were. But then, just the other day, I saw it. An unknown young woman sitting in the passenger seat of Caleb's car. I, who had prided myself on believing he would never cheat, felt like I'd been hit over the head from behind. The shock of Caleb's potential infidelity amidst my complete trust. Should I confront him directly or act covertly? After much thought, I consulted my sister. Married with an 8-year-old daughter, she had an immediate answer. Obviously, you gather evidence quietly. She was adamant that there was no benefit in alerting him without solid proof. So, following her advice, I focused on gathering evidence. Eventually, it became clear that Caleb was frequently seeing a woman. Her name is Abigail. She was the daughter of the owner of a private clinic where Caleb was a client. They mostly met on Thursday afternoons, driving around in Caleb's car. And I managed to capture them entering a hotel together several times.
I thought he was honest about women at least.
Disappointment hit me before anger. Married life wasn't unpleasant, but it wasn't easy either. In addition to the child support, I found out about his debt. Both were from before our marriage. Things I should have known about or were none of my business. He married me without disclosing these facts. Wasn't it almost like being deceived? There were times when I thought that. And I took pride in the fact that he was faithful. I never imagined even that would be betrayed.
I'll confront him with everything and then leave.
Caleb, carefree and nonchalant as ever, probably had no clue I knew about his secret. I wanted to give him a surprise for once. So, I was contemplating the day to reveal everything. Soon after, I received a shocking message from Caleb.
Sorry, I had an accident. I might not be able to move my body anymore.
I left work immediately and rushed to the hospital Caleb had mentioned. It was the clinic owned by Abigail's father. Feeling faint-hearted, I even called my mother to come with me. Are you Caleb's wife? Please, this way. I never imagined meeting this person under such circumstances. The one guiding us at the reception was Caleb's affair partner, Abigail. I had seen her face several times from behind or in profile over the past few months, but facing her directly like this felt surreal. Led to the room, I found Caleb lying in the bed.
Caleb!
Oh, Evelyn. You came. His voice and expression seemed good. My mother and I exchanged a relieved look. The message had startled us, but he seemed to have only minor injuries. What a relief, I thought. But then, the doctor's next words left me speechless.
There's a high possibility that Caleb has become hemiplegic.
Hemiplegic?
It means, in Caleb's case, the right half of his body might not move anymore.
Is there no chance of recovery?
The doctor closed his eyes as if in deep thought. It's difficult. Then said. I found myself sobbing uncontrollably, supported by my mother. After calming down a bit, Caleb began to speak hesitantly. This hospital, because of its facilities, can't accommodate long-term patients, so I'll be sent home.
But what about thorough examinations? Your right side isn't moving, right? There could be other reasons.
Well, I'm tired from the accident today. We'll revisit this. Caleb's words, somewhat hesitant, worried me, but I didn't want to push him. Reluctantly, I had my mother help me take Caleb back to our apartment. After laying Caleb in bed, I went out to the entrance to see off my mother. Sorry for the sudden call today. Thank you. It's okay. But it seems the timing to confront him about the affair has vanished. Indeed. What will you do now? If Caleb is truly hemiplegic, I can't abandon him just because he cheated. I'll think about it. Remember, you're the most important to me. It seemed like my mother was advising me not to sacrifice myself for Caleb. Thanks. She seemed to want to say more, but left with a complex expression on her face. The next day, my life caring for Caleb began. Although he was hemiplegic, the other side of his body worked, so the need for care was less than I expected. However, soon, taking care of Caleb's mental health as he couldn't go outside became more challenging. I'm just so bored. Surprisingly, he didn't complain much about his immobility, but his frustration seemed to stem from boredom. He would summon me frequently for trivial things, like wanting juice or needing his back scratched. These were minor tasks, but the constant demands wore me down. During such moments, my sister's daughter, my niece Scarlett, suddenly decided to visit our home. Scarlett and Caleb hardly know each other. Why she would visit under these circumstances was initially a mystery to me. When I asked my sister why, her reply was nonchalant.
Obviously, because I am worried about you. Even Scarlett at 8 years old is concerned about you.
That's sweet of Scarlett. I'd join if I could, but I'm swamped with work, and it's all I can do to arrange transportation. Mom seems busy too, but at least with Scarlett around, Caleb won't be able to throw tantrums in front of a child. Her prediction was spot on. With Scarlett present, perhaps due to his male pride or just plain embarrassment, Caleb drastically reduced how often he called for me. This gave me a chance to chat with Scarlett about school life, the latest elementary school trends, and all sorts of girl talk. But why does enjoyable time always fly by so quickly? As evening approached, it was time for Scarlett to leave. My sister called to pick her up, and though it was hard to part, it was time to say goodbye to Scarlett. Okay, Scarlett. Your mother will be here soon, so let's wait outside.
Okay.
As we headed to the entrance, feeling the reluctance, Scarlett suddenly seemed to remember something. Right. I forgot. She rummaged through her small bag and pulled out a white envelope. What's this? It's a letter I got from Grandma. She told me to read it in secret, away from Caleb. From Mom? Thank you. I received the letter from Scarlett. Right then, my sister arrived to pick Scarlett up, so I handed her over. After seeing Scarlett off, I quietly looked inside the envelope. It wasn't mailed but delivered through Scarlett, which seemed overly cautious. What could it contain? I casually read through and was stunned.
What? You're kidding, right?
The content was too astonishing to believe immediately. But my mother wouldn't fabricate such a lie. If this is true, I need to verify it. I hurried back to Caleb. As soon as I returned, Caleb spoke in a coddling tone. Did Scarlett leave? Yes, my sister just picked her up. Got it. Hey Evelyn, I'm thirsty. Wake me up and get me some juice or something. Ignoring his request, I swiftly pulled back the comforter and reached for Caleb's pants.
What? Evelyn?
Without hesitation, I pulled his pants down.
What are you doing all of a sudden? Caleb yelled, frantically trying to pull his pants back up. I sighed at the scene unfolding before me. It seems Mom was right. Hey! What's the deal with suddenly pulling down someone's pants? Are you taking advantage of my inability to move? That's awful, isn't it? Caleb looked up at me, bewildered. Indeed, doing it without saying anything was wrong. But I wouldn't have been able to confirm it otherwise. Hey! Are you listening? Caleb raised his voice again, seeing me silent and looking down. Seriously. This uncertainty about the future is unbearable. Maybe it's time to break up? I said his thoughts out loud, and Caleb looked at me in surprise. Oh, you seem almost happy about it? Your face is giving you away. Caleb, looking flustered, covered his mouth. Happy? No way. But maybe you're right. With this condition, I'll just be a burden. Maybe it's better we part ways. Caleb sighed heavily, exuding a sense of resignation. I don't mind, you know? I'll take care of you. We vowed at our wedding, remember? In sickness and in health. Eh? No, but... Besides, it's not all bad. We can still talk like before. And now, I won't have to fret over your affairs anymore. Eh? I smirked mischievously. Oh, me? An affair? His eyes darted around. His lie transparent. Don't worry. You may have been capable before, but now, you can't move by yourself. You won't be able to cheat anymore. Now you're all mine. Caleb let out a small yelp and turned pale. Evelyn, actually, I was planning to leave you. That's fine. Leave it to me. But I feel terrible about this. Don't feel guilty. We're a couple, after all. Despite my reassuring smile, Caleb trembled like a cornered deer. But just rest for now. I'll go prepare dinner. Caleb couldn't say anything more. I left the room. Certainly, I'd cornered Caleb. He'd surely take some action. I had believed Caleb was truly hemiplegic. It was the clinic of Abigail's father. I wanted to have it checked at a larger hospital, but Caleb resisted, so it never happened. Now I understand why he was so reluctant about hospitals and treatment. Immediately after leaving the room, I listened at the door. I'd left it slightly ajar, so Caleb wouldn't notice. I couldn't see inside, but I could hear everything Caleb did. Help! I'm in trouble! Soon, I heard him speaking to someone. He was on the phone. Speaking softly, perhaps wary of me. That's what she said. Before bringing up divorce, she insisted we won't separate. What should I do? Escape? Impossible. I'm too scared. She must know about you and me. She's unusually persistent about infidelity. She must know already. I heard it all. Now it was clear. Caleb was on the phone with his affair partner, Abigail. Please! Say it's a call from the hospital. Get me admitted somewhere else, any hospital. Otherwise, I don't know what Evelyn might do. As Caleb pleaded with the person on the phone, I knocked on the door. Caleb? Are you on the phone? May I come in? Oh! I'll hang up now. After waiting a moment, I entered to find Caleb looking paler than before, lying in bed. You look worse than before. Are you okay? Oh, I'm fine. Well, maybe not. Can you take me to the hospital? Of course, that sounds serious. I'll contact the hospital right away. Thank you. He looked genuinely relieved. Thinking this was his ticket out. He's sorely mistaken. The real game is just beginning. I'll expose everything about Caleb and Abigail at the hospital. Upon arrival, Abigail greeted us. Caleb, are you okay? Abigail. Thanks. I'm feeling a bit off. After what happened, it's understandable. Abigail smiled knowingly and looked at Caleb tenderly. Can I rest for a bit? I might even need to be admitted. He's not even a doctor to be making such decisions. But Abigail nodded understandingly and led us to a private room. We don't usually do admissions, but my father will come to check on you when he's available. Please wait here until then. About half an hour later, Abigail returned with the doctor. I had met him before. He's the clinic's director, Abigail's father. You're feeling unwell? Yes. Their exchange of glances was awkward. As Abigail's father raised his stethoscope to his ears, I raised my hand. Let's cut the act, shall we? What? Caleb, Abigail, and her father. All froze, except for me. Evelyn, what are you suddenly saying? Ignoring Caleb's protest, I grabbed his pants like before and yanked them down forcefully. Whoa! What are you doing? Stop it! Caleb scrambled to pull his pants back up. As I said before, something's off, right? Are you worried that if I become hemiplegic and useless as a man? I see. You were only after my body. I'm disappointed. Caleb pretended to be upset, not noticing the expressions of the others in the room. After your body? Unfortunately, I'm not as lewd as you guys. What did you say? You still haven't realized? Realized what? As Caleb tilted his head, Abigail whispered in his ear. Finally understanding, Caleb's eyes widened in shock. No, this is, well, that. Hemiplegic? You move too quickly for that. Everything's been exposed. Why keep up this poor act? The letter from my mother had only a few lines. I've looked into it, and there's a high chance Caleb's hemiplegia is an act, perhaps a lie to leave Evelyn? Maybe try pulling down his pants to see his reaction? Following my mother's advice led to this revelation. In a panic, Caleb, who was supposedly unable to move his right hand, easily pulled up his pants. So it was all an act from the start. No, that's not. Explain everything. Sweating profusely, Caleb complied. The day of the accident, the person riding next to Caleb in the car was Abigail. They were in the midst of an affair. The injuries were minor for both of us, but the car was badly damaged. I thought if the police got involved, Evelyn would find out. So I figured if I pretended to be severely injured, I could cover it up. The absurdity of it all left me speechless. Did you think you could keep up such a ridiculous life forever? No, well... Or was it all to hide your affair? That's not it. Before Caleb could respond, Abigail interrupted. Caleb was just trying to spare you the pain of a breakup. After all, finding out about an affair during a drive would be humiliating. So he told a kind lie about being hemiplegia, hoping for a smooth separation. Kind? How is cheating with someone much younger than himself, and then lying about it, kind? Stop it. Our love is real. Abigail said this proudly, but Caleb, shrinking in the background, looked like his elaborate lie had caught up to him. Is that so? Then you should have been upfront about it. Right, Abigail's father? Abigail's father flinched. His forehead glistened with more sweat than Caleb's. Well... The moment I realized the hemiplegia was a lie, I had a lot to say to you. Me? What might that be? Abigail's father looked at me with a forced smile. Perhaps he couldn't abandon his daughter. I felt sorry for him, but as a doctor, he did something he shouldn't have done. I guess you just listened to your daughter's pleas, but how did you feel watching me break down in tears? Don't you have any professional pride? Wasn't it empty to go as far as forging a medical report? Abigail's father seemed to catch his breath. He began to speak, carefully choosing his words. That wasn't forgery. It was a diagnostic error. How could such an obviously healthy man be mistakenly diagnosed as hemiplegia? He probably wanted to insist it was a mistake, not malicious forgery. Well, as for me, it doesn't really matter. Fortunately, I have relatives in both the medical and legal fields, so I'll be consulting with them. What? You can't. Abigail's father's complexion changed. Understandably so. For a private practitioner, reputation and client reviews are crucial.
If it became known that he dirtied his hands as a doctor just to unite his daughter with her affair partner, the clinic's reputation would undoubtedly hit rock bottom.
Please, have mercy.
There's no mercy here. I'll have my lawyer discuss the details with you later. Since Caleb seems to be in good health, please go back to your duties. He was hardly in the state of mind for work, but it was true that other patients were waiting. The calls of the nurses had been audible for a while. Yet, Abigail's father, who had been reluctant to leave, was finally forced out by me, barely able to walk, and exited the room. That left Abigail, Caleb, and me. In the silent room, I reconsidered the situation. On the day of the accident, Caleb was with Abigail, engaged in their affair. Right after the accident, given the proximity to the scene, they sought medical attention at Abigail's father's clinic. Perhaps it was then that Abigail conceived the idea. Could she keep Caleb for herself this way? It's unclear if Caleb had contemplated divorce, but it's unlikely all this was just to conceal an affair. It's more probable that Abigail persuaded him. For Caleb, who always wanted to quit his job, the allure of a doctor's daughter, a sign of wealth, was irresistible. Moreover, claiming hemiplegia would serve as an excuse to leave his job. He probably thought that if he used this as a pretext to break up before the affair was exposed, everything would neatly resolve. But that was a flawed plan from the start. I knew about their affair even before Caleb's accident. Though I lost the opportunity to confront them amidst the confusion of the accident, now that their lies were exposed, I had all the leverage. There was plenty of evidence. Well then. I looked slowly at the two of them. Caleb was sitting on the bed, and Abigail stood beside him. Regarding what comes next, I want a divorce. Surprised by my statement, Caleb and Abigail exchanged looks.
A divorce, is that okay?
Okay or not, I've known about your affair for a long time. I've been preparing to leave since then. Caleb looked conflicted, and Abigail's eyes sparkled.
So Caleb and I can be together. We don't have to meet in secret anymore.
Despite their bold meetings, it seemed they had been trying to keep it discreet. Yes, after we divorce, you're free to do as you please. However, there are conditions for the divorce.
Conditions?
Abigail frowned in confusion. Yes, don't worry, it's nothing serious. First, I'll be seeking compensation from both Caleb and Abigail. Additionally, there will be no division of assets. I'll be keeping all the savings. That's all.
Isn't that a bit unfair, Evelyn?
Unfair? Have you forgotten that for the 5 years we've been married, I've covered most of our living expenses? That alone is more than the savings. Caleb, notorious for his laziness, has never held a job for long. His income was unstable and significantly lower than his peers. Moreover, he was a big spender, still not having paid off debts from before our marriage. Sure, Evelyn has helped me, but I've been working hard too. He seemed dissatisfied with the idea of handing over all the savings. Caleb stuttered and struggled to find the right words. I didn't want to prolong this confrontation and was considering setting a later date to talk things through when, unexpectedly, Abigail came to Caleb's rescue.
Caleb! We've come this far, haven't we? Don't worry about money. Dad's here, and I'll take care of everything. More than anything, I want us to freely express our love as soon as possible.
Abigail.
Love conquers all.
In front of his soon-to-be ex-wife, the audacity of their display was astounding. What did Abigail see in him? That was a lingering question, but her intervention wrapped things up. All right, I'll leave the divorce papers, compensation, and the specifics to my lawyer. I'll send your belongings to Abigail's place. I suppose we won't be seeing each other anymore. Ah, well then. Take care. The two, already acting like a couple, cozied up to each other. I remembered something I had almost forgotten to mention. Oh, right. Don't forget to keep up with the child support payments. And try to at least make the interest payments on your debt. Abigail looked up at Caleb, standing beside her, in disbelief. What, child support? Debt? What's that about? Didn't you know? He has a child with his ex-wife. Oh, and don't get me wrong. I didn't steal him from his previous marriage. Caleb was already divorced when we met. A bit agitated. And the debt? Abigail asked. It was there even before we married. So, I don't know what it's for. How much is it? About $30,000, I believe. I smiled as I informed her, and Abigail's face went pale. Understandably so. With the added burden of paying me compensation, plus child support and debt, it's enough to make one feel faint. But we can work hard together to pay it off, right? Abigail, trying to motivate herself, clenched her fist and turned to face Caleb. Caleb. Yeah! And he nodded vaguely. Good for you, Caleb. You've got such a positive partner in Abigail. That should motivate you to find a new job. New job? Abigail's eyes were empty. Yes, because after this incident, Caleb hastily resigned. Now he's officially unemployed. He has no qualifications, so getting a full-time job might be challenging. But love conquers all, right? You'll manage. Abigail muttered under her breath. But still, there's that issue, she said. Abigail was clearly in shock, and Caleb was panicking. I waved goodbye to the two of them and left the hospital. Later, the divorce was finalized without issue. To my slight concern, Abigail's father paid all the compensation. Probably fearing that I might spill everything. Considering the potential fallout if this incident became public, he probably thought it was a small price to pay. This cleared all obstacles for Caleb and Abigail. However, they didn't remarry immediately. Caleb was pushing for it. Right away. But, well, maybe. Abigail was hesitating. Furthermore, the two of them were constantly fighting, with Caleb never finding a job and Abigail reluctant to make their relationship official. Even if you think someone is your destiny, it's understandable to hesitate when faced with such a hopeless case. In my situation, by the time I realized everything, I had already grown too attached to Caleb. If it wasn't for that, I would have left him much sooner. Thanks to all this, I'm now enjoying a peaceful life for the first time in a while. At first, I thought I might feel lonely. Caleb, despite his many problems, was good at entertaining and pampering people. But once he was gone, I realized how much more comfortable life could be. No more sudden demands for sweets, no more all-night gaming sessions. Some might find that exciting, but it was too much for my 30s body. Now I can take care of myself, live each day with ease, and not always on the edge. No more stretching beyond my limits. I'm looking forward to a life that fits me, without overextending or pushing too hard. She's not family, that's why he sent her home. How could she say such a thing about my mother? That one's just a housekeeper. This is a family trip, right? Those without blood ties are strangers. She's probably tending to the fields I told her to buy now. My grandfather said too, laughing. My father and I were shocked. Cut the crap. What would happen after his shouting? My name is Hannah, and I'm 17 years old now. I live in the rural area, which is still common to have extended families living together. My friends' homes are the same, and of course, so is ours. My paternal grandparents, my parents, and I live together. Living together is one thing, but what comes with it is the constant harassment. Hey, Olivia, isn't the seasoning in today's meal a bit strong? Well, it might be just right for our son and grandchild, but it's a bit much for us old folks. Sorry about that. I thought I was being careful. Careful, huh? And it's still this salty? Are you trying to shorten our lives by feeding us all this salt? Right, it's common for wives to cold-heartedly bully us frail elderly. You know, the wife in the house next door also. Come on, it started again. My grandparents always find some way to make snide remarks to my mother, Olivia. It's always about something so unreasonable. Like today's dinner, it's not even that salty. Moreover, she's prepared separate portions for us and for the grandparents, seasoning them differently.
I tried tasting it, and indeed, the elderly portion is bland. To me, the seasoning is far from enough. How can this be considered high in salt? Maybe it's better not to season it at all. Although my mother, who is used to it, just nodded along, I couldn't stand it and fought back. Grandpa, give it a rest. This is super lightly seasoned already. If you still think it's bland, why don't you taste your own sweat?
A kid should be quiet. If Grandpa says it's too strong, then it's too strong. That's right. Hannah, you're just a kid, you wouldn't understand. For us elderly, it's quite strong. Your mother could make it lighter. That's why she's a bad wife. Hannah, make sure you don't turn out like her.
Well, I love my mother's cooking. Unlike some tasteless old geezers. I'm in my rebellious phase, so there's no way I'm just going to take it and say okay. Catching a glimpse of my mother, she just hung her head, looking troubled, without retorting. She must have felt my gaze because she looked at me and gave me a weary smile. That tired smile pained my heart. It's not just about the cooking. Day in and day out, my grandparents always have something terrible to say to her. Like how she does the laundry wrong, or how her cleaning is not up to snuff. They even insist that leftovers are good enough for my mother's lunch, and that she should shower last. The list goes on. What era do they think this is? It's like something out of old drama series, these torments. The coldness my grandparents show my mother has another reason. It's because my parents keep their distance from my grandparents' peculiar faith. Instead of Christ, my grandparents worship Satan daily. They seem to blame my mother for my father, their son, being utterly indifferent to their faith. Their frequent saying is,
"That one, Satan will drop into hell."
My busy father is often away, and I come home late from the sports lessons. During that time, my housewife mother is left alone with my grandparents. Dad, Grandpa and Grandma were saying awful things to Mom again. They even suggested she's plotting something, saying the seasoning was strong when it was clearly bland. I reported to my father, who came home late at night. Honestly, I hate to bother my already tired father with such stories. But as his daughter, I just can't stay silent, can I?
Man, happened again? Those two really are something. They don't realize that thanks to Olivia managing the house, they can enjoy their carefree retirement.
It's all thanks to you too. I'm always grateful.
Dear, it makes me happy to hear you say that. Hannah, you're such a good girl.
No, I'm currently in my rebellious phase. It's just that my rebellion is aimed at my grandparents, so I'm less harsh on my parents. That's how much I dislike, or rather, detest my grandparents.
Don't worry about it, Hannah. I'll talk to them. Just keep being on your mom's side, okay?
My father said, patting my head, half irritated at being treated like a child, but also half pleased. Teenage emotions are complicated. One Sunday, I woke up late and lazily got out of bed, only to find my father arguing with grandmother.
Enough already, Mom!
My father's shouting voice snapped me to full alertness. Peeking into the living room, I saw my grandmother sitting on the sofa, looking grumpy. My father stood in front of her, and his face beat red with anger.
Making her work in the fields on such a cold day, what are you thinking?
He shouted. He is a regular office worker, but my grandparents are farmers, true to their rural roots. Though the size of their fields has greatly reduced due to old age. Field work? Is Grandpa doing it? Looking outside, I saw nothing but a white snowy landscape. The fields must be covered in snow. Is there something they're concerned about? When I was just thinking how dangerous it is for the elderly to work in the fields in such cold weather.
Oh, I'm starving. What's all this ruckus about? Where's Olivia? Isn't lunch ready yet?
My grandfather came in, scratching his belly. Okay, he is here. Wait, that means...
Wait, don't tell me Mom's.
My mother does indeed help out with my grandparents' farm work occasionally. But it's only during the harvest or busy times, generally, she doesn't. That's what I thought, but...
That's exactly it. I asked Mom where Oliver went, and she wouldn't say, so when I pressed her, what's the need to do anything in such snow?
Then she really went out. Oh my goodness.
Well, managing the fields during winter is crucial. I know that. I'm asking if it's necessary in the snow.
Snow repeatedly freezes and melts, messing up the soil. If you don't remove the snow, it'll be trouble in spring.
Lies. I remember hearing that when snow covers the ground, it's best to leave it be. You deal with snow before it falls or after the ground thaws.
Huh, is that so? Well, it's not the time to be impressed.
Anyway, Dad, we need to get Mom quickly.
Right, that was the point. Mom, let's talk later, okay? It's unbelievable that my mother has been working alone in such snow. Besides, it's starting to snow again. My father and I hurriedly put on our coats, boots, and dashed out of the house. She was there in the field. Exhaling white breath, her face red, she was shoveling snow. My father rushed over to her, and she gave a feeble smile. That smile again pained my heart. Why didn't I notice? While I was leisurely sleeping till noon, how many hours had she been shoveling snow? Being busy with work he brought home, my father hadn't noticed either and kept apologizing to the exhausted her. Sorry, Mom. Really sorry. That day, my grandmother got scolded by my angry father.
You will be the one to fall into hell.
After that, my grandparents were unusually quiet for a while. Seasons turned, and summer was approaching. The new term would start, and I would finally be in 12th grade.
How about going on a trip?
My father suggested. We have not traveled for a long time. After all, it's unlikely to go on family trips after high school graduation. Understanding the lonely feelings of a father, I pretended it was a hassle, but inside, I was excited. After all, parents pay for everything on family trips. There will be plenty of activities to do.
Oh, that sounds nice. How about a beach?
My rising spirits dropped at my grandmother's words.
Wait, are you coming too?
I regretted saying it immediately. Stepped on a landmine.
What a terrible grandchild. Planning to leave us out. A kid like that, Satan will.
She started, and eventually,
Olivia. It's because of your poor upbringing that Hannah has grown into such an unthoughtful child. What a useless, no good mother.
She began taking it out on my mother.
Hey! I might have said something wrong, but it's not fair to blame Mom for that. Oh, how sad for a grandma to have such a cold grandchild. It's all because Oliver didn't discipline properly. Woe is me.
Seriously? Woe is me, she actually said that. Astonished, I decided to give some payback by saying out loud,
Stop joking!
However, she continued to fake cry, while my grandfather nodded in agreement. Seeing the chaotic situation, my father sighed and tried to settle things.
All right. How about we go together?
Instantly, my grandmother's face lit up with a smile. Despite the troublesome situation, I was also looking forward to the trip. The day arrived. Living in the countryside, the airport was far. After hours' drive, we still had plenty of time before the scheduled flight. It's been a while since I visited the airport, so I wandered off from my family. When I thought it was about time and returned, I saw my grandparents sitting on the waiting chairs. Looking around for my parents, my father came back, munching on something. Looks tasty, Dad.
Yeah, this is really good.
You were eating something in the car, right? But I was also hungry, so I asked for one.
Olivia, you want it? Oh, where's she?
With a snack in hand, my father looked around.
Hannah, do you know where Mom is?
Weren't you with her, Dad?
No, she said she'd stay and watch the luggage. We said we'd go for a walk.
Hey Grandpa, do you know where Mom is? His response was unclear. Grandma, was Mom here when you came back? Yes, she was. So she was here. Maybe she's in the restroom? But no matter how long we waited, she didn't return. I checked the restroom, but she wasn't there. Looking around, there was no sign of her. Finding it strange, my father said with looking troubled,
It's almost time for departure. Where could Olivia be?
Is it time for boarding already? Then let's head over. Although my grandmother must have heard the conversation, she stood up without concern.
Mom, we need to look for Olivia.
She's not here, you know.
What?
Confused, my father tilted his head. I also looked at her. With a malicious smile, she said, "That one's not family. That's why I sent her home."
What the hell?
My father was shocked, and then my grandfather said with a laugh,
"She's just a housekeeper. This is a family trip, right? A wife without blood ties is a stranger. She's probably doing the fieldwork I ordered by now." What freaking are you saying?
We were just stunned, whereas they were laughing, unconcerned. Not family. What's that about? Mom's not family, then what is she?
What's that? Cut the crap. Olivia is my precious wife.
Wife or not, a stranger is a stranger. She's a bad stranger who ensnared our dear son.
Right, I never liked her from the start. That's why I disciplined her. A stranger, not working, just squatting in our house, she should at least do some farm work. Let's say, what was it? Right, a neat. Just like a neat.
They were chuckling with a vulgar laugh. I was so furious, and my vision turned red. I was about to say something when my father, quicker than me, stood in front of my grandparents and shouted,
"Don't mess with me." Yikes!
My father's voice echoed throughout the space. In the busy and crowded place, his voice resonated surprisingly far. Without caring about other passengers who stopped in their tracks, wondering what was going on, he continued to yell,
"Always just harassing Olivia with your petty torments. You think I don't know anything? I know it all.
Yes, I always tattle.
And just when I thought you reflected on that snow incident, you pull this childish stunt. What's so fun about this? Ryan, we were just trying to educate that woman for your sake. What education could you vile people possibly give? It should be you who needs to be educated."
Ryan, how dare you speak to your parents like that?
Dad, you said Olivia was a stranger, right? She is my precious wife. My beloved wife. The most important family to me. You say that my family member, Olivia, is not your family, that she's a stranger. Then I'm a stranger too. You two and I are strangers. Ryan, what are you saying? What am I saying? That's my line. Do you even realize what you're saying, what you're doing?
My grandparents' faces got paled at his fury. I had never seen him so angry. It must have been the same for my grandparents. My grandmother looked like she might burst into tears any moment. However, my grandfather gave a wry smile at my father's state. It infuriated me even more to see him laugh it off. "Listen, Ryan. Calm down." He seemed to want to somehow control his son, to maintain his dignity as a father. "Anyway, we're running out of time. Let's just have Olivia give up this time. And, well, let's just go, just us. The gate close is almost here. And we don't want to waste the cancellation fee for the hotel we booked." What? Wait, what is he even saying? Expecting Mom to give up this time? Whose fault does he think this is?
Whose fault do you think this is?
My inner thoughts and my father's shout coincidentally overlapped. My grandfather let out a startled yelp.
"That's enough. If you want to go, then just go on your own." "No, you guys were supposed to come too."
"Oh, I'm not family either, so it's fine."
"Hannah."
As I casually responded, her face showed shock. What? Did she think I would go along with them? As a daughter of a non-family mother, I am not family either.
"No way. You're family. You have a blood connection."
My bond with my mother is stronger. At a loss for words, my grandparents could only snort in response. I turned to my father. "Let's go home, Dad. Mom is waiting." "Yeah, that's right. I'll call her soon after." "Okay, let's do that." Carrying our bags, we headed for the exit, followed by my flustered grandmother.
"Hey, wait! What about us? What's going to happen to our trip?"
"That's not our problem. Go on your own. And preferably, don't come back."
"What about the money?"
"If you want to go, pay for it yourselves."
"No way!"
Her voice echoed around us. My grandfather stood dumbfounded. Leaving them behind, we headed home, where my mother was waiting. She was seemingly happy, perhaps because we had called from the car, but I didn't miss it. Her eyes were red. There were traces of tears. Those two, I'll never forgive them.
Hey, Dad, I've been thinking.
That's a coincidence, so have I. While hugging my mother, I spoke to my father, and sensed him nodding in agreement. That night, my grandparents, having few money for the trip, returned home huffing and puffing. They could have taken a taxi by promising to pay upon arrival or borrowed money from a police station near the station to take the bus. But they didn't even know or understand such things. That's just like them. I guess it served as a good punishment. At first, they were extremely apologetic, but in front of my mother, they began to grow bolder again.
We did nothing wrong. That woman is to blame.
But my father had enough.
That's it. We're finding a new house and moving out. We're cutting ties. I don't care about your old age.
He made an unexpected declaration. My grandparents were pale, but his determination didn't waver. He temporarily moved my mother and me to a hotel and hurried to find a new house. He found a good property convenient for his commute and my school. Dad, you are so reliable. Then, on moving day,
please, we apologize for everything up to now. Don't abandon us.
My grandmother was begging, crying.
What are we supposed to do if you two leave us?
My grandfather was nearly in tears. I don't care. With a dismissive tone, my father left the grandparents in despair.
Olivia, please. We're sorry for everything. We won't do it again. We'll recognize you as family. So let's go back to how things were, okay?
Astonishingly, to whom Grandma pleaded was my mother. After all the terrible things they've done, how conveniently self-serving. Feeling disgusted, I saw my mother take my grandmother's hand. With a bright smile on my mother's face, just as her face lit up in response, my mother said, "Judgment from the grand white throne."
Huh?
Satan sees all the anger in this world.
What are you talking about?
The day to kneel before Satan is near. You'd better prepare your excuses. I hope you make it to heaven.
Wait, hey, wait.
Goodbye. Leaving the speechless grandparents behind, we got into the car. As we drove away from their house, I glanced back once to see them standing there, dumbfounded. They were getting further and further away, and I realized that might be the last time I see them. Inside the car, heading to a new beginning, as I chuckled at the passing scenery, my mother looked at me curiously.
What's up?
Well, just feeling a bit envious.
Of what?
Of Dad. He said, my precious wife, my beloved spouse, the most important family member to me.
Really? Hannah, what are you spilling?
Oh my, still so lovey-dovey after all these years. Really makes one envious.
Come on, no kidding.
My mother, blushing, lightly tapped my head. It didn't hurt, but I pretended it did and rubbed my head, then added, I wish I could have a boyfriend like Dad soon. Right after that.
A boyfriend?
His pained cry echoed through the car, holding the steering wheel.
Hey! Open this door. Are you out of your mind? I won't forgive you.
Probably, that's what they're saying on the other side of the thick door. But I can't hear them, and frankly, I don't need their forgiveness. Facing the three flustered fools on the other side, I waved with a smile and said, Let's go. Wonder if you can make it back safely? Good luck. My name is Leah, a 30-year-old office worker. I'm a newlywed, married for just a year, with no kids yet. When I was single, my hobby used to be taking day trips using the train on my days off. My friends would sometimes ask,
Don't you get lonely traveling alone?
But I find it surprisingly pleasant to move at my own pace without a fixed schedule, more so than traveling with others. Well, to be honest, there's a bit of loneliness, but the fun outweighs it. I have a favorite travel magazine, and sometimes I plan trips based on it. As I went about my days, I noticed something.
Huh? Isn't that the same guy I saw last week?
It seemed coincidental, but after the third time, I might have thought it was fate if I were a romantic. Instead, I just felt a bit scared. But it turned out he felt the same.
Sorry if I'm mistaken, but didn't we meet last week and the week before at completely different places?
He approached me with a slightly scared look. Wait, do you think I'm following you? To clear up the misunderstanding, I opened my travel magazine and said confidently, I'm just traveling based on this magazine. Surprised, he responded. Me too. And opened the same magazine, smiling happily. That was how I met my husband, Henry. He turned out to be a really interesting guy. I, being cautious by nature, always end up carrying a lot of stuff, but he said, I always travel light so I can move easily. Nowadays, with cashless payments, you hardly need cash. A mobile phone is enough. He laughed joyfully. Talking with someone with such different values was very stimulating. We hit it off discussing our favorite travel destinations and exchanged contacts that day. Though we both liked solo trips, we started going out together more often. Surprisingly, I enjoyed sharing memories with someone else, and I found that local food tastes even better when shared. One day, after about 6 months, Henry asked me to go out. I didn't feel bad at all, in fact, I felt the same way. And remember being very happy. We decided to get married 6 months into our relationship. I thought our happy newlywed life was just beginning. But my expectations quickly shattered due to Henry's parents. My parents-in-law, Jack and Aaliyah. Their house is about a 30-minute drive from ours. They are still in their 50s, with Aaliyah working part-time, and both of them are employed. Initially, they used to visit our house, but lately, we've managed to maintain a reasonable distance. However, an incident occurred that disrupted this balance. Hey, Henry. Let's go here on our next day off. I agreed. Sounds good. Our post-marriage tradition of mini trips to tourist spots continued. As usual, minimalist Henry recently reduced his belongings to just a mobile phone, even entrusting his wallet to me. It feels so light. I don't look like someone who's about to go out at all, do I? And said with a contented smile. I thought to myself, at least carry your own wallet. But it wasn't really a bother. It was an ordinary conversation, but that day was different. Oh, by the way, Dad and Mom's wedding anniversary is coming up soon. How about we invite my parents on our next trip? I tensed up at Henry's sudden suggestion. Of course, there was a reason for that. But I couldn't just say no, so I responded. Yeah, that sounds good. We haven't seen Aaliyah and Jack recently anyway. Unaware of my slightly strained face, Henry didn't notice a thing. The next day, they were really looking forward to it when I called. He told me. I guess I have to give it my best shot. So, I steeled myself. Honestly, I'm not comfortable around my parents-in-law. They're not bad people, just not a good fit for me. I'm more on the reserved side, not fond of noisy places. And this applies to people too. Talking to high-energy people can be mentally exhausting for me. Speaking of my parents-in-law, they are incredibly cheerful. When I first met them, their exuberance overwhelmed me. Nice to meet you, I'm Henry's mom. And I'm the dad. They announced loudly like comedians, making me stiffen up involuntarily. That time, the 4 of us, including Henry and his parents, went out to eat, and they chose the restaurant. I wonder if it's their favorite place? I thought casually, but when we got there, it was an all-you-can-eat buffet. Meeting their son's girlfriend for the first time at such a casual place made me laugh. We're so nervous today, we haven't eaten anything since morning. Aaliyah, who didn't seem nervous at all, said cheerfully to me. That's right, that's right. Plus, we have to get our money's worth. The true reason for skipping breakfast was quickly revealed by Jack. Their loud voices attracted quiet laughter from nearby tables. I was embarrassed by then and wanted to go home. Looking sideways, thinking Henry must feel the same, I was surprised to find he wasn't there. He had gone to get food. Not to be outdone, the parents-in-law also got up, piling their plates with food. Are they planning to hibernate after eating so much?
Can I really become part of this family?
I managed only a forced smile at their overwhelming presence. I barely ate that day, nervous as I was. Feeling uncertain about the future with Henry, I was touched when they said at parting, "What a wonderful girlfriend, Henry. He may be awkward, but please take care of Henry from now on, Leah." I was simply happy to hear that. I loved him too, and I thought the parents-in-law weren't bad at heart, so when he proposed a few months later, I had no hesitation. But it seems I'm not good at judging people, as at our wedding, the bridegroom's parents, my parents-in-law, completely disregarded the ceremony and focused only on eating, leaving my parents utterly disillusioned. Henry has a brother, Jonathan, who seemed to be the only sensible one. "I'm sorry my parents showed such an embarrassing side. It's really shameful." He came to greet us politely, as I heard from my parents. Jonathan, who lives alone, seems to have a poor relationship with his parents. It appears the feeling is mutual, as they once complained. "That boy is always so noisy with his complaints. Just the other day, he bragged about buying several eggs when it was limited to one per person, and I'd scolded him for it." Seemingly annoyed. "Don't you feel guilty about benefiting yourself at the expense of others?" That's what Jonathan apparently replied to Aaliyah. Hearing this story, I thought to myself, "Isn't that a fair point? What's wrong with that, Aaliyah?" I honestly felt that way. When the parents-in-law came to visit our new home, they arrived empty-handed. That wasn't a problem, but then they started rummaging through our shelves, exclaiming, "Isn't this the snack they're advertising on TV? I've been wanting to try it. Oh, and this one too." They foraged through my hidden snacks like they were on a treasure hunt. Even though I bought those snacks, Henry, without any malice, said, "If you want them, take them home." That's fine, right, Leah? I wanted to smack him right there and then. Sure, go ahead. All I could do was respond with a forced smile. I had a suspicion, but it was clear now. The parents-in-law were moochers. "I want this. I want that. Give me. Give me." In the early days of our marriage, they came over every week, sensing an opportunity, and I was almost driven to neurosis. "Hey, don't you think there's something off about Aaliyah and Jack? They're kind of annoying." My anger exploded, and I ended up fighting with Henry. Despite how angry I was, Henry looked puzzled and said, "No, not really. Is it that strange? They've been like that since I was a kid. Don't worry about it," he said, patting my shoulder lightly, which made me furious. "Are you kidding me? If this keeps up, I'll divorce you. Just do whatever you want." My raised voice seemed to alarm Henry, and he quickly put an end to the parents-in-law's invasions. I don't know what Henry said to them, but since then, we've been living peacefully. However, the thought of traveling with the parents-in-law naturally made me anxious. On the day of the trip, I was shocked to see them waiting. "It's been a while, Leah. I heard you've been busy with work. Must be tough." Aaliyah spoke to me, but I was far from calm. The reason lay in the appearance of the parents-in-law. Aaliyah and Jack, where's your luggage?" Looking closely, Aaliyah and Jack had brought nothing with them. Even for a day trip, isn't it normal to bring at least a bag? "We wanted to be ready to move quickly, and I have a sore shoulder." Their response, echoing something I'd heard before, was baffling. The rest of the trip went as badly as I'd feared. It was soon revealed that the parents-in-law had forgotten their wallets. Feigning ignorance, they said, "That's strange, isn't it?" Watching them play dumb, I thought, maybe it's better to just call off this trip, or even cancel it, yeah. Unfortunately, my feelings weren't understood. Henry, looking exasperated, said, "Again? My folks have always been like this. I'll cover for them, but make sure they pay me back." It seemed the trip would continue. As the parents-in-law laughed and apologized, all I felt was disgust. Even after we arrived at our destination, the parents-in-law's rudeness didn't stop. They complained to the store staff. "Isn't there any free tasting? Wow, stingy, huh? When I, feeling thirsty, bought a drink and hadn't even taken a sip yet, Aaliyah said. Can I have a sip of that? I'm thirsty too. I can't believe I forgot my wallet, huh? While I forced a smile, an exasperated Henry intervened. Stop it, it's embarrassing. Look, I'll buy you one. Overhearing this, Jack muttered under his breath, referring to me. What a stingy woman, lacking compassion. I didn't miss his comment. I could say the same to you. I should have left at that point, but I was a bit stubborn. A similar incident happened twice more afterward. Apparently, the first trip was so enjoyable that Aaliyah contacted Henry for another. When I saw them on the station platform, I couldn't help but feel chills. The second time they brought their wallets. They brought their wallets this time, but when the moment came. Oh no! This is the wallet I used before. I rushed out in such a hurry. Their obvious lie was something only Henry would believe. And on the third trip, they forgot their wallets again. By then, it was clear, it was a deliberate act. Aaliyah. Excuse me, but did you deliberately forget your wallet? You never intended to pay, did you? I hit the nail on the head, and her face turned red. Hey, what a rude woman you are. Apologize to Aaliyah. Jack glared at me, demanding an apology. No way. I've thought this for a long time, both of you are just too greedy. Caught in the argument with the parents-in-law, Henry seemed at a loss. Tourists around us watched curiously. Noticing their gaze, Henry seemed to feel ashamed and finally. Stop it, please. He broke down crying. I was honestly disillusioned. But the parents-in-law reacted differently, rushing to a crying Henry. I'm sorry, Henry. It was my fault. You're so kind to cry for me. Aaliyah said, with Jack quietly standing beside her. I didn't know how to react to this farce. Only one thought came to mind. Yeah, this is impossible. Let's get a divorce. That was all I could think. Seeing Henry's tears, the parents-in-law seemed to lose their fighting spirit. Leah, we know we're often in the wrong. It's Henry's money, but still, we've taken advantage of him. It's Henry's money, after all. I don't know why they said it twice, but their words, dripping with sarcasm, showed no real remorse. And so, it was confirmed that they had deliberately forgotten their wallets. Aaliyah referred to it as Henry's money, but we both work, and his salary is only slightly higher than mine. Our actual incomes are not much different. Recently, every trip with the parents-in-law ended with, I want to buy this too. Maybe some gifts for the neighbors as well. What's that? Looks tasty. Hey, Henry. Buy that for me. Because of their endless demands, Henry's credit card bills were shockingly high. We've been living mostly on my salary for the past few months. At the time of marriage, I considered it family money and believed in spending within the limits of our allowance for personal desires. Don't be a burden to your partner. The thing that infuriated me the most was when cashless-reliant Henry exclaimed at our travel destination. What? Only cash here? Hey, Leah. He called me over and pulled his wallet out of my bag. It only had a few dollars in coins. No. I messed up. You know I don't carry cash, right? And he said without malice. It still makes me furious thinking about it. For the record, I always paid for my own things. Yet, the parents-in-law probably thought I was living off Henry's money and just complaining. We split living expenses, so such accusations were nothing but unpleasant. Thinking all this, I coldly watched Henry crying and Jack consoling him. After a moment of thought, I said, I was wrong too. Sorry for being presumptuous. You guys go ahead on the train. I'll buy some drinks and follow. I smiled calmly, and Henry and the parents-in-law happily boarded the train. Their smiles turned to panic a few minutes later. When I didn't return, Henry must have felt something was off, as he messaged me. Leah, are you coming?
The train is about to leave. Right then, the heavy doors slowly closed. From the platform, I had a clear view of Henry's panicked face. It seemed he noticed me and was shouting something. I was replying to his earlier message. I'm divorcing you. If your parents are so important, live happily with them. Goodbye. I ignored his calls, thinking, doesn't he care about being a nuisance on the train? Geez. He sent several messages afterward, but I ignored them all. Henry's face through the door slowly turned to anger. Hey! Open this door! Are you crazy? I won't forgive you. As if he was saying. As if I needed his permission. The parents-in-law seemed to be yelling too, but of course, I couldn't hear them. Smiling at the three fools, I said, let's go. Wonder if you'll make it back safely? Good luck. The train quietly departed, quickly disappearing from sight. That train won't stop for a while. Walking back would be quite a challenge. After watching the train leave, I hurried home to pack my bags and left. I stayed with a friend I'd been discussing divorce with. Henry's barrage of messages continued until they suddenly stopped. His phone must have died. He often forgot to charge it before bed, and it was only at 20% this morning. Portable battery chargers are essential. That was Henry's mantra, but his crucial portable battery charger was in my bag. Along with his wallet. I left all the belongings he entrusted to me at home. He must be panicking by now, but that's not my concern. While planning my next steps with my friend, my mobile phone rang. The caller was unexpected, Jonathan, Henry's brother. Leah, I'm sorry. Did something happen? According to Jonathan, Henry's phone had run out of battery, and in his panic, he dropped it, shattering the screen. Unable to reach me, the desperate parents-in-law could only think of one person to call. So, I got contacted, but all I got was ask Leah for the reason. He seemed unwilling to say more. I told Jonathan everything about Henry and the parents-in-law without holding back. As I spoke, I could hear Jonathan's voice getting sharper over the phone. From the other end, Leah's making a fool of us. Tell her off, Jonathan. The in-laws were loudly insisting that Jonathan, with his way with words, would outtalk me. After I finished explaining, Jonathan snapped. Hey! You scoundrel! Are you stupid? What? You scoundrel? I had heard from Aaliyah that when Jonathan gets really angry, he becomes intimidating with a high-handed tone. And since Jonathan only speaks sense, Henry and the parents-in-law can't retort when he gets like that. I could hear the in-laws arguing in the background, but I quietly hung up the phone. Henry was not content with the divorce, but after I conveyed through a lawyer that I wanted to divorce without any further contact, he reluctantly agreed, accompanied by Jonathan. Later, Jonathan told me that the ex-parents-in-law had always been terrible moochers, disliked by neighbors and even school associates. When Henry returned to the ex-in-law's house, he quickly became the talk of the neighborhood, and now all three hardly ever go out. Henry's colleagues, not knowing what to say about the quick divorce, were treating him like a delicate subject. I'm glad to cut ties with them after this incident, Jonathan told me with a laugh. The ex-parents-in-law were known at the local supermarket for their outrageous behavior. This is expiring soon, so give me a discount. It's a little damaged, so I'll take it for free. Jonathan expressed his long-standing embarrassment and disdain for his parents' behavior. Recently, Henry has been seen joining them, reflecting their blood connection. It turned out the ex-parents-in-law were both gambling addicts, often skimping on food expenses, which explained their constant hunger and lack of money. When asked about the reason for my divorce, I can only say it was a difference in values. If anyone can tolerate such behavior, they must be incredibly broad-minded. It was just too much for me. I've continued working and even started a side job as a web writer after my travel blog caught a publisher's attention. I still travel, combining it with writing assignments. Solo travel seems to suit me best. Last month,
I earned a decent income from writing, so I'm planning to take a vacation to a resort somewhere far for relaxation. I'm still only 30 years old, life is just beginning.
You're nothing but a useless parasite. Get out of your parents' house now.
As I was moving down the hallway in my wheelchair, I was suddenly confronted by my brother's wife, Angela. Thinking it was just her usual harassment, I pretended not to hear. But then, she stood in front of me, blocking my way. Next thing I knew, I felt like I was floating, followed by a jolt of pain.
Ouch!
Angela had suddenly pushed me and my wheelchair to the floor. I felt a sharp pain in my arm and ended up crawling on the floor. Then, with a pleased smile, she kicked my wheelchair out of my reach.
Why are you doing this to me? You're in the way. I'm not giving back your wheelchair until you agree to leave your parents' house.
Angela always looked down on me, treating me horribly without remorse. At that moment, I realized I could never understand her and decided to leave the house I had grown up in.
Now this big house and all its wealth are mine.
Angela's face lit up with a devilish grin, delighted by the situation. At that moment, I vowed revenge against the truly terrifying Angela, who seemed willing to do anything for her own desires. I am Margaret, 33 years old. 3 years ago, on a rainy day, I fell down the stairs at the station. The fall caused a spinal injury, leaving me paraplegic, dependent on my wheelchair. When I first realized I couldn't move my legs, I cried tears of frustration. But now, I've accepted my reality and have adapted to work from home, doing what I can. I've always lived in my parents' house, which was remodeled 2 years ago to be wheelchair accessible. Being self-conscious, I mostly stay indoors. In my family home, I also live with my brother Kevin and his wife Angela, who married a year ago. Angela, my brother's wife, is 3 years older than me. I was initially excited to have Angela like a real sister, but that was a big mistake. The day Angela moved in, after unpacking, she smiled at me sweetly and asked in a gentle voice,
Now that we're living together, I'd love to have a heart-to-heart in your room to get along better, Margaret.
I'd love that. I really want to be friends with you, Angela. With high hopes for a pleasant future, I entered my room with Angela pushing my wheelchair. But as soon as the door closed, her kind expression vanished. She frowned like a different person and said something shocking. You know, you're an eyesore. Excuse me.
Are your ears as bad as your legs? Your presence in that wheelchair is an eyesore.
I was stunned by Angela's drastic change and managed a weak, uncertain smile, saying, You're joking, right? To which she berated me even more.
I hate jokes. Everything I said is my honest opinion. But you just said you wanted to get along.
That was just an excuse to be alone with you. Hearing this unexpected statement, my mind went into a panic and my hand, covering my mouth, started trembling. Wait a minute. I can't comprehend this. Does she hate me? As I took a deep breath trying to understand what was said, she hurled more insults at me.
People who live leisurely at home without working are called parasites.
Why are you being so harsh? Did you come to my room just to say these things? Yes.
I feel sick having someone who only consumes money living in this house.
I never imagined she could be this kind of person. My mind was still in turmoil, but I knew I had to respond. Looking her in the eye, I said,
I am working and paying for my living expenses. Don't lie. How can you work while staying at home? Are you stupid?
I explained that I work from home, but she didn't believe me at all. Instead, she demanded that I, a useless freeloader, leave the house. I was shocked by such harsh words from her, whom I had only met a few times since my brother's marriage. Confused and unsure what to do, she said, I can't stand even breathing the same air as you, and left the room. Alone, I kept replaying her words in my head. Should I tell my brother? As I was about to open my door, I remembered my past self. After falling down the stairs and losing consciousness, I awoke in the hospital to find my legs immobile. At that time, I couldn't accept this new reality immediately.
Though I claimed to live facing forward, in reality, I hardly left my home, conscious of other people's eyes. Maybe Angela is in a similar situation. Instead of upsetting everyone by telling my parents and brother, I decided to wait and see. Surely, if we live together, we'll understand each other eventually. With that thought, I calmed my shaking heart. I tried to act cheerful around Angela, initiating conversations to get along better. But her cruel behavior only worsened day by day. She played the kind sister when our parents and brother were around, but as soon as they left for work, her harassment began. You don't work or pay, so you don't have the right to eat. One day, she threw away my lunch as soon as I sat down at the dining table. I've told you before, I do work, and I contribute to the food expenses. I have the right to eat. If you lie too much, your nose will grow like Pinocchio's. No matter how much I explained, Angela wouldn't listen. She insulted me and intentionally blocked my room door with objects to trap me inside. Unable to endure anymore, I told my parents and brother when they returned from work. I started talking when Angira is around, making sure she couldn't deny it. I'm having trouble because Angela threw away my food and trapped me in my room. That's not true. She said she didn't like what I made and threw it away. I was cleaning and accidentally left the vacuum cleaner in front of Margaret's room. I'm sorry for not being useful. Margaret, I'm sorry for making you feel bad. Angela acted like an actress, tearfully apologizing to me, and my parents and brother were completely deceived. I couldn't win against this. I started thinking that it would be better not to engage with her. After that, I hardly talked and spent more time in my room. One day, a year later, as I was returning to my room after breakfast, she started yelling at me in the hallway. Still planning to stay in your parents' house? You're so persistent. I'm sick of this pest. You useless parasite, get out now. Being used to her harassment, I pretended not to hear. But then she stood in front of me, blocking my path. Please move aside. As I tried to push past, Angela laughed and forcefully kicked the side of my wheelchair. I was hit by a severe impact and toppled over before I could steady myself. A sharp pain shot through my arm. I tried to get up, but I couldn't right my wheelchair lying on its side. Crawling on the floor in pain and humiliation, I looked up to see she standing over me, looking smug. Desperately looking up, I saw her trying to suppress a laugh, her arms crossed, clearly enjoying the situation. How pathetic you look. What a spectacle. Please, help me. Well, if I must. There. She kicked my wheelchair even further away, putting it out of my reach. Don't you think this is too much? I have to do this to get rid of a parasite, don't I? Give me back my wheelchair now. Not until you say you're leaving this house. So, what will it be? Looking down on me and acting so cruelly with ease, I realized I could never understand her. I decided to leave the home I'd grown up in. Fine. I'll move to a high-rise condominium. A high-rise condominium? As if you could afford that. Your denial is just sad. I don't care if you don't believe me. I'm leaving. Please return my wheelchair. Just wait for the caretaker who's due soon. I'm finally getting rid of the nuisance. Now this big house and all its wealth will be mine. Get on your precious wheelchair and start packing. That's when I realized her true nature. She would go this far for her own desires. Such a terrifying person. She looked like nothing but a devil to me, leaving me on the floor without returning my wheelchair, and then leaving the house. The floor was cold. And I was getting colder. I need to do something. Lying in the hallway in the middle of winter, my body temperature dropped rapidly. I tried to crawl to my wheelchair, but my injured arm was too weak to move. What if I stay like this? Shivering from the cold, I heard the front door open, and the caretaker arrived. Help me, please! Hearing my cry, the caretaker rushed over in a panic. Rubbing my injured arm unconsciously, the caretaker noticed something was wrong and immediately took me to the hospital.
Luckily, there were no fractures, just bruises, so I was prescribed some ointment. Back at home, filled with frustration, I started preparing to move. I won't let this go. I'll show everyone her true nature. And so, the day of my move arrived. Angela had finished breakfast and was getting ready to leave. Hurrying to the entrance, she said to me, "Make sure you clean up and leave before I come back. And never return to this house." "Don't worry. I'll leave without leaving a trace." "Then goodbye. Forever." She left in unusually high spirits, her voice lively. I wonder what face she'd make if she knew the tragedy about to befall her. Get ready, my plan is almost complete. Despite saying this, it was hard to leave my cherished home. I said my farewells, touching the pillars and walls for the last time. Goodbye, my dear home. Thank you for everything. As the moving truck drove away, I watched the house disappear from view with a sense of longing. And true to my word to Angela, I moved into the top floor of a high-rise condominium. Watching the outside view, evening came before I knew it. The setting sun peeked through the buildings, illuminating my face. So beautiful. I can see this every day from now. Despite everything, I was filled with hope for my new life when my mobile phone rang. Seeing Angela's name on the screen, I calmly answered the call. "What's going on?" "The house is empty. I've moved out, as you can see. I'm busy, so I'm hanging up now." "Wait. Who gave you permission to do this? There's no TV, no air conditioner. I bought everything in the house, so no permission was needed." "What? Don't be ridiculous. Return everything." "I won't give back what's mine. By the way, I paid for the house's renovation and utilities. I should be asking you for money." "What? You're kidding, right?" "I'm serious, as you hate jokes. And yes, I moved to a high-rise condominium. The view from the top floor is amazing." I took the opportunity to tell her the truth she never listened to. "Did you realize you were bullying someone who provided you food and shelter? That's impossible. I never took anything from you. How did a homebody like you make money?" "I'm a stock trader." "That's a transparent lie." "I worked for the securities company before my accident. Trading stocks is easy for me. I have $3 million in savings now." "Wait. Are you saying you, not your parents, are the wealthy one?" "Yes. I let my parents and Kevin save their earnings for retirement." "What? I married into the family thinking they were rich." Angela's true intentions spilled out. I knew it but had to ask, and she confirmed my suspicions. "Didn't you love Kevin?" "Love doesn't fill the stomach. I thought you were rich after seeing the big house. I was so fooled." "You misunderstood on your own. By the way, I invest in properties too. I own several apartments besides this condo. The wealthy and victorious one is me. You misjudged, sadly." "What? I won't forgive you." "Make a fuss if you want. You should worry about yourself." "Why?" "I've put that house up for sale." "We're still living there." "That's terrible." "My parents and Kevin moved with me, so you're left alone." "Oh, and Kevin has blocked your calls and emails." "What?" I almost laughed at her loud and shocked reaction. She frantically tried to contact Kevin, but of course, got no response. I revealed more truths she didn't know. "I owe it to you, Angela, for pushing me in the wheelchair and causing my injury." "Thank you." "What?" "The caretakers saw everything and told my family, so they helped me. Actually, we had secretly planned to move out without you. Moreover, my brother prepared something to definitely trap you. Remember last night when Kevin suggested you go out today to make moving easier? That was to clear the house before you knew it." She was silent for a moment, then suddenly changed her tone, trying to sound sweet. "Margaret, I think I went a little too far. Let's be close from now on. Okay? Telling such lies will make your nose grow like Pinocchio's." I wish we could be real sisters, Margaret. I can't stand this nonsense. By the way, this whole conversation is on speaker, and my family is listening. No one will forgive you. Kevin is divorcing you, so please live well on your own. She, realizing she couldn't persuade me, made a last-ditch effort. Kevin, can you hear me? You're joking about the divorce, right? He doesn't seem interested in responding. He's laughing and enjoying your desperate situation. Shut up. Let's talk properly. I'll find your condo and come right now. Tell me where. Please. Everyone burst into laughter at her, thinking she could still be forgiven. But knowing her, she might try to find our new home, so I sternly warned her. If you force your way into the condo, I'll sue you for trespassing. Don't say such scary things. I'm serious. And about the injury and mental distress you caused, I'll sue for compensation. I have the hospital reports, so you can't escape. Pay $20,000. I'll be broke. You don't need the money, you're rich. I'm asking for compensation to make you reflect. If you don't agree, talk to my lawyer. Goodbye forever. I don't care about poor Kevin, but I don't want to lose wealthy you. I apologize. Please forgive me. No way, you fool. I hung up forcefully. I gave Angela's photo to the condo's doorman, warning him about her, so security will respond if she steps foot inside. My brother, not wanting to see Angela's face anymore, had a lawyer I know finalize the divorce. Angela, who squandered my brother's earnings, only got $2,000 in the property settlement. She was living in the house we put up for sale, but the real estate buyer found her and she was fined for trespassing. Angela, now a criminal, is shunned even by her family and is lost without a home. I demanded the promised $20,000 in compensation. We will make sure she pays. Our family is living spaciously in a new high-rise condo, enjoying every day. Although I liked my big detached house, the view from the expansive windows, unobstructed by my wheelchair, is refreshing. The city lights at night bring a new joy.